So on our timeline here, we're kind of transitioning at the end of community engagement here, at least the core of it. So we're synthesizing everything we've heard. We're going back, but there will also be another opportunity for you guys to give input on the second survey that will come out, as well as another kind of did we hear you event where we'll focus on, okay, this is everything we heard, just checking what you guys would like us to know, anything we missed, and we'll move on from there. But for now, we are looking at everything that we've gathered so far and trying to translate that into a restructured comprehensive plan that will hopefully be more clear, concise, and complete than the current version. So just to recap everything that we learned this week, Northern Belmont was our first character area event. So that happened on Wednesday. We were at North Belmont Elementary. Central Belmont, we were at Gaston Tech Works on Thursday. And then for the southern area, which includes most of both parts of that peninsula, we were at the Daniel Stowe Botanical Gardens. So talking specifically in North Belmont, I recognize at least a couple of people who were there. So that's great to see you guys coming back. So there we talked about a lot of the board content. Some of the greatest opportunities we heard there were connectivity issues, streets without sidewalks, a value for education, as well as textile history that has had such an impact on and use in that area. And just really from those areas to downtown Belmont. So talked about that, talked about arts and culture a little bit as well. Talked about the relationship that that area has between residential and industry, as there's been a lot of industrial growth over there as well. So that's kind of what we've heard there. Going to Central Belmont here, again, Gaston Tech Works. So we heard a lot of great feedback on the waterfront and how Belmont, though downtown is great, and downtown could use some improvements. There's not as much connectivity to the waterfront, especially from a walkability, bikeability standpoint, as there could be. So we heard about that, heard about opportunities to expand downtown parking. People are hungry to kind of find a creative solution for that issue. So that's something that we're going to be looking at as well. A lot of commentary about redeveloping the old middle school down there and, what could become of that. There's a lot of creative ideas going around there. Same with the Stowe property behind downtown. People are just excited to see what could happen next, as well as on East Belmont and how, crosswalks that are on Catawba Street could be improved. A lot of comments about speeding and vehicular issues with pedestrians. So just a lot of opportunities there to make improvements. And then lastly, I'll talk about Southern Belmont. So that was just yesterday. We were at Daniel Stowe Botanical Gardens. I've heard a lot of comments about sustainability, especially preserving the tree canopy was an issue for people down there, especially just talking about how do we, address the growth pressure that's going on, but not lose the character of Belmont, and especially lose kind of the natural environment and the character of that in Southern Belmont. Talking about that, people were a big fan of local events that were going on. We looked at that, and people are also talking about waterfront access on the peninsula. I mean, people that don't have private docks and access down there can't really get there as easily as some other folks. So the waterfront questions were especially important down there. Then, as well as connectivity to downtown, what to do with South Point Road, and then other opportunities surrounding, maybe there needs to be some small retail there, not big chains, but maybe there's opportunity to have like a local pizza shop, local coffee shop, maybe some grocery options down there on the peninsula as well. So we talked with residents at length about what types of commercial development could be cultivated down there. These are of all those three workshops, this is kind of what we heard for the consensus of opportunities. So these are the things that people were excited, concerned about as far as opportunities go. So of course, we also heard about the challenges and everything like that. Wanted to show the opportunities today because it's a little more inspirational. So we have that there. I'm going to call it the history, especially a lot of long-term Belmont residents are especially concerned that Belmont maintains its historical feel and the character that grew out of that, especially in the face of these other challenges. You see trees up there, waterfront up there, like I talked about. The light rail is obviously a big opportunity. How should that be addressed? How realistic is that possibility? So all of these things will go in and inform the comprehensive planning process. So I believe I'm going to hand it off to Joe here. We'll talk about what's in the comprehensive plan and offer a little more background on that.
Thanks, Bill. And thank you all for being here. Before I get started, I just want to say I've seen a couple folks taking pictures of slides. We're going to make the recording of the presentation available to everybody after today on the project website. The individual slides will also be up there and the stuff off of the boards. So you're welcome to take pictures and video if you want to. No need to do that. We're going to make all that available to you as soon as we can. Also, my name is Joe. I'm with the Center for Comprehensive Planning, which is a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to improving comprehensive planning throughout the country. I'm a part of this core project team that's doing this work that Dylan so elegantly described a minute ago. But I'm sticking around for at least 2 years afterwards. So I'm going to be here to make sure that the stuff we're proposing, for something you are telling us you want, it's actually working its way into the built environment. 2 years will probably not be enough. I hope to be here longer than 2 years, but I am committed to at least 2 years being with you. So I'm a long-term partner, and I'm so glad you're here. So some of you have been here before and seen a presentation about what is a comprehensive plan. It was a little bit more detailed in the beginning, but now as we're evolving, more space in the presentation has been taken up by what we've learned. So this is going to be a very quick and then brief presentation on what is a comprehensive plan. In short, it's this thing. You have one already. It was written in 2007. It was updated in 2018. So if we have a comprehensive plan already, why are we going back to the drawing board with it? Well, the reason we have one in the first place is twofold. There's a technical reason we have a comprehensive plan, and there's a real reason we have a comprehensive plan. And I will only tell you the real reason if you promise not to tell the state of North Carolina. Is that what we promise? Okay. The technical reason is this general statute. It says if you want to have zoning in your place, you have to have a comprehensive plan. Zoning is important. It's how we decide what goes where in the built environment. The real reason is it is a chance for you all to commit your vision of Belmont in 20, 30, 40 years to paper. So we can find consensus and we can decide together how we want Belmont to function. So there's a technical reason and a real reason. We're in the process of updating it now in the 2018 version of the comprehensive plan. And there are a variety of reasons that we might update a comprehensive plan. And all of these, to some extent, are played for this comprehensive plan. It's possible that something in Belmont has changed. We have a map of the development project that happened in between the major development project that happened between the last comprehensive plan update and this one. There are 48 new projects that have changed the tenor, the character, the feel of certain places of Belmont. This is a chance for us to step back and reflect on how Belmont has changed in the last 6 years and decide what we like, what we don't like, what we don't want to see more of, and what we can't wait to see more of. It's possible that something nearby has changed, say a light rail extension that may be impacting Belmont. It's possible that something in the world has changed between the last comprehensive plan update and today. COVID-19 happened. That has changed how all of us think about public health emergencies, how we handle them, how we respond to them, how seriously we treat them. That is something that is not reflected in the past comprehensive plan. It could be reflected. There could be new legal requirements. There's been an update to the North Carolina State Building Residential Code that we ought to reflect in this updated version of the comprehensive plan. And then, as you see on the boards, it is possible that our preferences have changed as a group. And that is also something that ought to be reflected in an updated comprehensive plan. I went through the laborious exercise of counting the number of individual pieces of feedback there. We have over 13 individual pieces of feedback. So that's dots or Post-it notes. Some of the Post-it notes have multiple 1,300. What did I say? 1,300. I get why. I'm sure why. Now I know. Over 1,300 pieces of individual engagement. And there's more than that. Some of those Post-it notes are really densely written on. And that suggests to us that the people who live in Belmont feel very differently about how Belmont has evolved versus how we did in 2018. I'm going to turn it over to Michael to talk through the structure of the current comprehensive plan, the one written in 2018, versus some of the things that we're thinking ought to change in the new comprehensive plan. So thanks, Michael.
Hey, Joe.
Yeah.
Real quick, sorry to interrupt you. What is the planning horizon? Is that a 5-year vision, 10-year vision?
It has traditionally been a 20-year vision. You don't want to go too far out because it's impossible to predict what's going to happen, and too short, you're almost in a current planning mode at that point.
Right.
But we're targeting about 20 years, roughly 20
Okay.
years.
And again, maybe you'll get to this, but I'm interested in what is the process for monitoring the plan, changing the plan, et cetera. And, you know, I don't want to take up time here. That's not value to everyone.
It absolutely is. It's a great question. We do have a Q&A portion at the end,
Okay.
but this is a great question. I'll answer it now. This is something that Tiffany has brought up about accountability measures.
Right.
This is a big visioning document. We want all this stuff to happen,
Mm-hmm.
but how can we ensure that it does? So that's something that we're thinking about, not just in terms of what are the changes we're going to propose functionally, but also how do we maintain some level of accountability and over time, because some of these things are things that we expect to have happen next week. Some are 20-year big visions. How can we set some smaller milestones and ensure accountability around those to make sure that we're at least incrementally moving towards the things that we hear are important to y'all. So that's something the consulting team is absolutely thinking about, and we've got some ideas.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Well, first of all, my name is Michael Blaine with Men Design Collaborative. We're the lead on the project with Joe and Dylan on the scene up here. Well, first, thank you all for being here. It's been a long, but really enjoyable week. I have lived in Charlotte for over 30 years. I've come to Belmont over years. Being here for a solid week and getting to meet so many folks has been really rewarding to me personally. To get to know you all's names. It's been very enlightening in many ways. When this process started out, we were to just update the comp plan, just give it a little dust off and retool it, bring it up to date, and then give it back for staff to use. At the beginning of the day, this is your document. This is a document that belongs to every citizen in Belmont. It is a working document. And if you really look at it and understand what the document is intended to do, as I described, it is about being a working document, a living document, so it can change every time. In fact, it's intended to be updated on a regular basis, even annually. Once adopted, something that staff is the primary user of this document. So the current 2018 plan, as you see on the screen, is organized very much like a book, and we've got an exercise both mentally and with our co-chair to carry this thing around. One of the first things we've got to do is dive into this, read it, understand it, know where it came from. Starting in 1995, before Waste Code, 2007 when it was first drafted, 2018 when it was updated. Slight update in 2022 to chapter 6. But it's organized very much like, I think it was a book, chapter 1 through 6. And I won't go into detail today in terms of what each chapter covers, but you do have to go through this to understand it. And so we put ourselves in a position of many folks, including ourselves as consultants. You as citizens, is it intelligible? Is it clear? We'll talk more about that in that. More importantly, as a working document, we will make sure that staff and planning board and council understand this thing from ground up and make it usable. Right now, you've got to read through the whole thing to really understand it. Joe's got a great analogy here. I can't steal it. Can't steal it from it.
Steal it if you want.
Yeah, it's great because it will describe kind of how we've looked at this thing from the beginning. Again, in order to get to the actual items, to get to the policies, to get to the things that are really important, you have to wade through a bunch of history lessons and examples and things that frankly are important, but they're in the way of getting to the utility of the document. So one of the things we're going to do, we thought about it, talked with Tiffany about it. We're going to relook at the structure of the document. Instead of having chapters that relate to, an intro and history of Belmont, we're going to look at a document structure that's more along the lines of topics and issues at hand. Currently, we're looking at different topics: single streams, land use, economy, mobility, community character, parks and rec, infrastructure, environment, intergovernmental relationships. These are topics, they're goals, they're the headings of policies that will begin to fill in below these topics. Can't really call them chapters at this point. But we're in the process of looking at this as a way to organize a document such that it has higher utility, much higher utility than it has currently. again, working document. It's got to be something that, when this is adopted sometime, probably first quarter of next year, we don't want this to go behind glass somewhere or in a drawer and gather dust. It has to be at the ready and usable. So this is our proposed new structure. Icon make a move on that. But anyway, that's my small part of this presentation. Give you a little sense of the import of what we're doing. We are going a little bit further than the initial request to just update the plan. We're going further for you. So try to do that. Go back over to, well, I'm sorry, we got this. Sorry. One component of the current plan is a section dealing with small area plans. Small area plans take different forms. Just like the comp plan, hear the word plan, well, that suggests that maybe it's a map, right? It's a drawing, it's a singular thing. As I described, it really is what it is. Small area plan, same thing. It connotes many things to different people. From a planning perspective, typically that's a plan, master plan, if you will, done for a small area. So a certain area of town in the city that actually has some growth potential. It has maybe some issues with traffic or other things. Back to our headings that we just went through. In the 2018 plan, there were 4 small area plans. One focused on city center or downtown, one focused towards the north of Montcross, one at Southport, and then one on Goldens. Just 4. One could argue whether that was too few, too many. One could argue whether those were the only ones that needed focus back in the day. We're going to take a look at this 2 ways. One is to see if, in fact, these need to be revisited. These 4 more need to be revisited. Frankly, where these occur within the comp planning document. Smaller plans are often snapshots in time relative to planning effort. They help you study. Sometimes they involve outside consultants other than ourselves. Sometimes they involve partner developers, other governmental organizations and groups. So we're looking at this relative to where it sits within the document and where it sits in terms of being an effort over the next coming years. What the plan is updated as to what it reside. But I don't want to have to update the comp plan every time with a small area plan focus that comes to light. These things can kind of pop up in light of the city without knowing it. We have a map here showing where those were located. But anyway, again, it's here with Montcross, Center City downtown, Southport, and then the Wilkes. So you can see what the small area plans leave a lot of other things out to question, a lot of other areas that are worth studying. So we're going to look at that in the sum total of those parts. But I'll turn it back over to Joe. Michael.
So through this point in the process, we have not been making any suggestions. We have been listening. We've been observing the feedback that you all have given, but we are now to the point in this process where we're going to try and take what we've learned and synthesize it into some more concrete recommendations. We're not going to take all of this, disappear for 3 months, and then present a finalized comprehensive plan. This is an iterative process. Our intention is to keep bringing this back step by step to make sure that we're on the right track at every stage. Here are 3 big things that we learned when we were here earlier in June and throughout the course of this week that we were here. The current comprehensive plan is full of good stuff, but for a couple of reasons, it's a little bit challenging to use. We've also learned that most people aren't aware of the comprehensive plan, or if they're aware of it, they've only read a very small portion of it. Lastly, we've learned that there are topics that aren't addressed in the comprehensive plan that are important to you. The evidence of that is all over those engagement reports inside the room. To break that down a little bit more simplistically, a good comprehensive plan, maybe I'll say the best comprehensive plan, are as clear, concise, and complete as possible. I'm going to pull some examples of the current comprehensive plan that identify some deficiencies. But from a clarity standpoint, there's a big chunk of the current comprehensive plan, maybe a page, that talks about slope analyses. This is very important to know if you're developing within certain parts of Belmont. But if you're an average person picking up the comprehensive plan, we are asking ourselves, is this something that you actually need to know to understand the comprehensive plan? We think that it's probably. Our proposed approach is to take this 250-page document that you have and reconsider the stuff belong in the body of the document. Just some data points belong to introductions to these chapters. you need to know this to understand the environmental section of the comprehensive plan, for example? Or does this sort of data belong in appendices, where if you're reading the document, you have a much smaller, much more consolidated version you can actually get through. And if you wanted to dig a little deeper into soils, or topology, or hydrology, or really intense infrastructure, you can go to the appendices and you can learn that. This is another example from chapter 3. I have read that there is some support for extending the National Register District in downtown. That is true, but is not particularly actionable from a policy standpoint. It's not written there, but I expect there is some support for reducing the size of the National Register District. There might be some support for removing it entirely. There might be some for expanding the National Register District to the entire city. A data point like this in isolation is not particularly helpful. So understanding what we have consensus around and then building policy language to actually support decision-making is something that is critical to this effort. The current organization, as Michael described, is comprised around 8 big, broad, bold, unimpeachable goals. And in chapter 6, there are 9 pages of small and specific actions. That's what we're given. 8 goals, 9 pages of action. It's challenging at times to bridge that big visioning language of why we are doing what we're doing in the built environment and the individual projects that are called out in the current comprehensive plan. One of the reasons that we're asking the questions we're asking is to build out that middle layer, which we're calling the policy layer. This structure, goal, policy, program, is a simple logical structure to follow, and support that is also what that state statute that I mentioned earlier in the presentation says. The comprehensive plan should be comprised of goals, policies, and programs. The big and bold is the why, the small and specific is the what, the program, and policy is the how. How do you get from the vision to the actual built environment in these programs? I'm going to give an example. The Parks and Recreation goal is that the city of Belmont should ensure a range of park and recreational opportunities for all citizens. With something that big and broad, the mandate really is to just build as many park facilities as possible. Every piece of equipment, every way to engage with it, this could be literally anything. We've also heard from the response boards that somebody, probably a young lady, wants more monkey parks. That's an important thing to know. But if the comprehensive plan was just written with a big broad goal and this tiny program, and the opportunity came to build swing sets or a seesaw, we would not really know whether or not that's what the comprehensive plan helped us to do. So one potential policy would be, we should routinely ask the young people in our community whether or not the parks and recreational facilities are working for them. That's a policy that allows us to operationalize this big goal that's very broad and ensure the programs that we're actually putting in the ground are working. A good comprehensive plan is also concise. I have 2 documents listed on the screen right now. The first is the USDA shipping point market inspection instructions for cabbage, and the second is the Declaration of Independence. Would anybody here like to make the argument that the first document is more important than the second? Okay, no hands are raised. That's good. That first document is 7,000 words long, and the first document is 7,000 words long, and the second is 1,300 words. The point that we're trying to make here is that just because something has more words, more pictures, more stuff, does not make it more important, does not make it more impactful, does not make it more useful. We mentioned that this is a 250-page document, which is very difficult at times to get through, even if you were a practitioner. The 2007 version of the comprehensive plan was around 160, 170 pages, which means between 2007 and 2018, it grew by about 50%. I would argue that between those 2 dates, it did not grow 50% in utility, it did not grow 50% in ease of use. It got bigger, but it did not necessarily get better. One of our big goals is to consolidate this 250-page document down into a format that is consumable, usable, useful as much as possible. Our mantra is not more is better. Our mantra is better is better. We're exploring every avenue to improve your comprehensive plan. One of the ways Plus Survey is particularly good at doing this is by taking a lot of data and information and putting it into consumable infographics and just graphics in general. So you can expect to see your updated comprehensive plan have significantly more graphics like this. It's also important for a comprehensive plan to be as complete as possible. And this is the point in the presentation where I'm going to preface the next stage of the effort. So a comprehensive plan can never be complete because the world is constantly changing around us. It's been 6 years since the last update. A lot has happened since then. We are going to take that 1,300 plus data point of information we collected, consolidate that, and try to build consensus around certain goals. There's going to be stuff in the comprehensive plan that you love. Things like walkability. A lot of people can agree on walkability. There's probably going to be some stuff in the final comprehensive plan that you personally don't necessarily agree with. There might even be a thing or two that you vehemently disagree with. But a comprehensive plan at its core is a visioning document from the entire community as a whole. Our goal as consultants is to try to get as close as possible to document that the most possible people can agree upon, but we also recognize that's an impossibility. The reason that we're taking this step by step, engaging with you as often as possible, is we want to make sure that this works for as many people as possible. Add stuff, take stuff out. Our goal is to get as close to consensus as we possibly can. I'm going to highlight one more time that we have a poll and we have a project website, which is the best way to stay engaged with this effort. First poll that we have is a broad poll about Belmont. The second poll that we'll be putting up in mid-July is a poll that puts those policies that we talked about, that policy layer that we're in the process of building, in front of you. So you'll have a chance to look at every single policy that's being proposed, say whether you agree, you disagree, and a chance to weigh in on what you think the process is going. So please keep an eye out for that. So having said all of that, now is a good opportunity to ask any of those lingering questions you have. If you all aren't comfortable asking a question in front of everyone, we will be here through 2 o'clock. We can walk you over the boards, we can talk to you individually, answer those questions, but happy to answer any questions you may have right now.
This point you've been discussing, and the survey, are they already up there on your website?
Mm-hmm.
Can you give us the website? I'm not going to read those.
Sure, not a problem. You can use those or you can go to ourbelmont.org.
So it's not that one?
Yep, .org.
Ourbelmont.org.
Project website. We'll get you to everything. Good thing to keep an eye on. We're updating that on a fairly regular basis. Good question.
Yes, so Joe, you mentioned that you personally are committed for 2 years. Is that a Fusonia as well?
Well, so yeah, that's a very good question. So the Center for Comprehensive Planning is the entity, so the nonprofit is the one that's sticking around.
Okay.
My goal is to be a conduit to reach out to those other consultants if need be. Right. So because I've been engaged in the effort, it's going to save time in reaching out to the transportation consultant, the infrastructure consultant, and plus Urbia. So instead of the city trying to go through that effort, any questions come to me, and if I need to reach out to them that I can. They're not committed to that 2-year time frame, but we have an excellent working relationship, and I expect that they will be as available as possible.
We will continue to process.
So I'm also curious about how you'll interact with the city council and the others that, you know, have a say in what actually gets action. Is that your role ongoing? Make sure that your findings here translating clear, concise messages. Then,
absolutely. So the entire project team is responsible for that in the short term. We've actually met with a couple elected officials individually just to make sure that, you know, what they're hearing from their constituents is reflected in this effort. Because we understand that people who are in this room are self-selecting. There's a lot of Belmont that hasn't been out to these events,
right,
and they're the best way to make sure that broader concerns are being met. So,
right.
So we are engaging with them individually. The project team will also be there through adoption of this. And me personally, I will be engaging with this process as broadly as possible, but the city is creating a technical advisory committee. So that's department heads and folks within city administration who actually work on the ground to make sure that the comp plan recommends something. It's actually feasible if this is possible from a technical standpoint, from a feasibility standpoint. My intention is at a minimum to engage with that group because that's the feasibility group. So I think we plan to meet monthly, maybe quarterly. We're still working out the details, but I'll be attending those meetings on a regular basis.
So an observation and a question. It sounds like a lot of work for one person. How can we as citizens learn about all those interactions and all the people that are you know, form an opinion about how things can actually work on that. Because I've worked with large projects for a very long time. There's lots of points of failure, sure, especially when you're working with lots of different organizations. So I'm just curious, how can we kind of get a sense for everybody to have to work?
Sure, that's probably a question that Tiffany is going to be also good at answering because she has a sense of the way that the city messages a little bit better than I do. The question you asked earlier is one creating accountability measures and making those accountability measures accessible to the general public to ensure that you're able to understand where certain elements of the comprehensive plan are in the capital budgeting process, for example, whether they're feasible, if they're dependent upon state or federal funding, you know, where are we with those budget cycles. So I think the big goal for us is to consolidate the plan into something that everybody can understand. Once we're at a place of common understanding, then beginning to message how things are moving along. And then Tiffany.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we can look to do as well is create sort of a workflow of who's at the table, right? And really the umbrella, right? Here's the big plan. Here's what goes into that. There's three components of that. Who's at the table of each of those three? Who are the responsible parties for implementation? How often or in what ways does that information go to our advisory board and or to city council, planning board? Who, you know, who at the table needs to be involved in making sure that the actions are implemented? And or that if they're not able to be implemented, that we go back to the drawing board to still figure out other ways to reach the community's goals of the plan. So it might be helpful for our staff to work with the team as part of the next iteration, just kind of have a workflow or hierarchy chart so that everyone's fully aware of who are at the seats of conversation, and if you have concerns, who to get a hold of to make sure that you can be with them. I would put a plug in for the fact that the city just launched our City Connect, which will now allow us to more effectively communicate with our residents. We certainly would try to get email, social media, but we understand there's a large portion of the population that doesn't utilize those tools. And so before now, we didn't really have a way to do phone calls to specific areas or groups. We now have that method. So we're encouraging everyone to sign up for City Connect. That will allow us to call, text, or email. In addition to that, we'll continue to use resources like the water bill to come for mass communications to our residents, but we are always open to ideas of better ways to effectively communicate. So if you have any, please come see me. But there's, I would say there's probably not one method where we would reach out and let you guys know. I hope that we would reach out in multiple ways to make sure we get everyone.
Right, and I'll say that it's a little difficult to say definitively what we're going to do because the comp plan itself is still taking shape. And once that takes shape, then we'll have a better sense of the role of the technical advisory committee. But certainly reporting out as regularly as possible, maybe direct engagement with you all is something that we would consider. But beyond just saying what we're doing, a component of that will be asking the way we're going to ask in mid-July, is what we're doing working? Is this the right mode of communication? If not, we'll be adaptable and make sure that it does work long term.
I like what I'm hearing. Communication is a real issue, I think, from my perspective, as a resident, just a member of the Board of Adjustment. I've seen a lot of folks in my travels, probably, you know, Belmont and whatever, who have a lot of misconceptions about what's happening in Belmont. And in my dealings with the city planning department, the impression of how efficient this is and how well organized in terms of what's going to happen where. However, I think we're all aware that there are problems in this, but we hope the comprehensive plan will do. And what I'm leading up to is, I think, one of the most important things that we can do is try to reach the people out there who have all these misconceptions about poor planning in the fire department, letting in too much development in the wrong places. They're outgrowing the infrastructure, you know, the system is falling apart, and the city's just not doing a good job in general. So I think what I'm trying to say is communication between your agency, and the city planning department, maybe the city council, might be a good thing that we're trying to get information out in a more efficient way to the public so that they can help eradicate some of these misconceptions. The other thing I just wanted to add is, I think some of the not misconceptions, there is a lot of concern about too much development coming in core areas of the city. And we heard some of them, the village centers, including especially the South Fork area, where, you know, where traffic and sewer is a concern. You know, so what's going to happen there?
these issues? Has too much been approved ahead of the infrastructure being able to accept it? So getting this message out to the public is going to be really important if you want to really have them understand what's really going on here. And I guess that's it.
All very good points. I will say that selfishly, I want the document to stand on its own. I want the comprehensive plan to be so clearly written and straightforward that you can hand it to somebody and they can understand the vision from the comprehensive plan itself. The way that it's written now, that's not really possible. And Michael teased an analogy that I forgot to put in the presentation, so I'll pull it out now. When I'm getting ready to cook something, I know that what I need is in the fridge and the pantry and a cabinet. I go and I gather my ingredients and I make what I'm trying to make. The way the current comp plan is designed, the ingredients are there, but they're not in the fridge. There's some in the fridge, there's some in the upstairs bedroom, there's some on the lawn, and if you know where they all are, you can find them, you can understand them in totality. But our goal with this is to put all those ingredients back in. If you're trying to understand mobility within the city, you want to take all that mobility information and put it in one place. When you're picking up a document, you can understand it in totality and also understand how it interacts with the other elements of the comprehensive plan. So that's the first answer for me, is making sure the document stands on its own. It's short, clean, comprehensible, and anybody can read it. Even hopefully a young person can pick it up if they have the attention span for it and understand what we're saying. So plain legibility is the high priority for us. And I certainly understand the questions about messaging. That's something that it's not the city's working on in a parallel effort. So hopefully that is sufficient.
And I will add to that, is one of the reasons we're doing the plan in the way that we are with the three consultants working simultaneously is we really want to make sure that to the best of our ability, the community feels heard. We have heard the community's concerns about infrastructure and transportation. Those are not falling on deaf ears. And so what we've done is say, well, instead of planning for land use and then figuring out how transportation fits in that, and then later focusing on infrastructure, we're going to do it where all the teams are communicating so that we can plan for land use, call it standalone as a document, it's being informed by the current realities of our infrastructure, right? When we talk about land use and transportation, certain land uses are not supported if our transportation corridors are not enhanced, upgraded, fixed, right? And so they have to work together, they have to talk. And so by having them on board at the same time, it'll allow for those conversations to happen. And so they're not siloed and they're in fact, while they have standalone plans, informing one another behind the scenes so that when the community gets the document, it's informed, but it's not as cumbersome of a document to read three individual words and try to piece that together and figure out how they all should inform. That's being done by the comprehensive plan team.
So does that team own this plan?
The city owns this plan. They are working on our behalf as a third party, bringing their expertise and knowledge, but this is the city's plan. It is the community's plan. It's not staff's plan. This represents the voice of our community, and it should, and if it doesn't, it's not.
Yeah, you've probably heard the expression plan the work plan. This obviously sounds large, complex, interdependent, all those things. Is it your group's responsibility to monitor that and recommend changes, or is it the city?
Sure, I would say probably that's about.
Right.
So this is a comprehensive plan, normally overseen primarily by the planning department, but as was mentioned by Joe, there is a technical committee. So planning, for instance, we can have conversations about public safety and what the implications of growth and development are on our public safety team, but by no means can I direct the work of the public safety team. So it's important to invite them to the table. The same is true of infrastructure. It's important to invite public works to the table and to together as a collaborative city team, figure out what we can do to further the goals. So they are at the table because one department cannot do it alone to figure out a full city vision.
Any other questions? Those are all very good questions. So I'd like to thank you all again for being here. I encourage you to talk with us on a one-on-one basis. If there are any lingering questions that you have, and stay as engaged with this process as you possibly can. This comprehensive plan is going to be as great as it can be based on your feedback and input. So please try and give as much input as possible. There are more opportunities to do that. And please encourage your neighbors and friends, anybody else who's invested in the future of Belmont to do the same. So thanks for being here.
To briefly add to that, the website will continue to have that survey, and we will update that survey as we move forward with the process. So bookmark it, send it to your neighbors, put it on your fridge. There's great magnets you can grab and get to the neighbors as well. Or put it in the back of your car too. So that if you're in traffic, everybody can see.